Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC 287, Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya 2. And something that has shocked me in the lead up to this fight is that people are massively overlooking Israel Adesanya in this rematch. And what kind of sparked me to make this video was I did a poll on the community tab of my channel asking, who do you think wins the UFC 287 main event? And 66%, 2/3 picked Alex Pereira. And then I started to think about it. When I discussed this fight in live streams, when I've discussed this fight in the members only Discord, the vast majority are picking Alex Pereira in this fight. And I believe there are legitimate and logical reasons to pick Alex Pereira. But there are a couple narratives that I just keep hearing regurgitated over and over and over again. And we're going to talk about all those reasons in this video. And I'm also going to briefly discuss my prediction for this fight. And I'm also going to discuss the future of the middleweight division. Because I believe after UFC 287, there can be something, a set of circumstances that could happen that would make Israel Adesanya haters, it would make their heads literally explode. But we'll talk about that later in the video. Before I get into anything, if you picked Alex Pereira to win this fight, I do not think it is a bad pick. But there are a few things that I keep hearing when justifying a pick for Alex Pereira that I think are completely delusional and I think are completely ridiculous. Now, before I get into any of those reasons, what was my prediction for UFC 287? I did a full in-depth breakdown of this fight, roughly 20 minutes. I'll link it down in the description if you want to go check out the detailed prediction. But essentially, I picked Israel Adesanya via second round TKO. And what I think is going to happen in this fight, I think Alex Pereira is going to come out super aggressive. I think he's thinking in the back of his mind, I finished this guy twice. Why wait till the fifth round? Why wait till later in the fight? I think he's going to come out aggressive, looking to land that left hook and try to knock out Israel Adesanya early. But I think Israel Adesanya, there's two key factors in this fight for Israel Adesanya, and that is his lateral movement, but I also believe he will attempt to have some forward pressure against Pereira. Pereira fights the best when he's pushing forward and just looking to knock you out. And I think in this fight, Adesanya is going to be a little bit more aggressive himself, but I also think he's going to refuse to end up with his back on the cage. And I just think Adesanya, you look back at the first fight, and we're going to talk about it more in depth in a second, but you look back in the first fight, Adesanya won 80% of the fight and almost stopped him in the first round. And I just think Adesanya is the more technical fighter, more technical striker, the more well-rounded fighter. And I just think even if he isn't able to find a finish, I think that he will win a decision mixing everything in, whether it be his clinch work, his grappling, and his kickboxing. I think he will mix everything together and win a decision. But I do believe that he will stop Alex Pereira in this fight. That is my prediction. Okay, now what are the reasons I believe Israel Adesanya is being overlooked in this fight? He was a dominant champion. He was the champion for, the last few years. I think he won the belt in 2019 or 2018 over Robert Whittaker and stopped Robert Whittaker, one of the best middleweights in the world. But one of the reasons that I believe people are massively overlooking Adesanya in this fight, and this is one of the really stupid narratives that I am so tired of hearing, is that Alex Pereira is 3-0 in combat sports over Israel Adesanya. And while that's technically true, these are completely different sports. You have Alex Pereira, who defeated Israel Adesanya via decision back in 2016. And if you want to add context to that fight, it was a robbery decision. Israel Adesanya should have won that fight. He should have won on the scorecards. He didn't, but he should have. It was a robbery decision. Almost 99% of fans can agree on that. Then you have the second fight, which took place in 2017, again in kickboxing, and Adesanya is winning the majority of it. Hurts Pereira bad. Pereira survives. Pereira comes back and KOs Israel Adesanya. And what I have to say about those two fights, don't get me wrong, you can get some information from those fights based on their striking ability, but it's not really meaningful in any circumstance because first off, it is a completely different sport. Kickboxing is not MMA, okay? It is no different than if Pereira beat Adesanya at ping pong back in 2016, 2017. rather than maybe a few instances where you can say, okay, well, look at the striking here and there. But the reason I don't even think that's true is because you're looking at fighters in 2016 and 2017. I know this might be shocking. 2016 was 7 years ago. That's craziness. 2017, 6 years ago. These fighters, Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya, have drastically improved and evolved since then. Not to mention, it's a totally different sport. So Alex Pereira is 1-0 over Israel Adesanya. Let's look at that one fight. Because I've been hearing and I've been getting a lot of comments saying something over and over and over again. And it's been driving me nuts on my prediction video. Alex Pereira was out striking Israel Adesanya. Let's break it down round by round, okay? Round one. Here's the common thing I've seen in comments in my live stream. Alex Pereira was winning round one until the end, where Adesanya almost finished him, and he was saved by the bell. First off, I believe Adesanya was winning that round even without the ending sequence of that round. It was very close, but I thought Adesanya won that round even without those last few shots right before the bell, okay? But even if that wasn't true, even if Pereira was slightly edging the round, you can't just delete out a moment of the round to justify what you're saying. You can't say, well, if Adesanya wouldn't have rocked him at the end of the round, it would have been Pereira's round. You can't just do that because it happened in the first round. That would literally be the equivalent to say, well, Adesanya was winning the 5th round until he got TKO'd. Yeah, but he got TKO'd in that very round. So it's irrelevant. Then you have the second round. And the common theme here is Pereira won the second round, which I agree on. But it was a very close round. It was a very, very close round. I thought Pereira edged it. I thought he landed a little bit better shots, but it was a close round. Then you have the third round, where Adesanya just out-grapples him for pretty much, 80% of the round. Holds him down, took him down, held him down, beat him up on the ground. Then you have the fourth round, where Adesanya outstrikes Pereira for the entire round. He lands good shots throughout the round. And this was a clean, clear-cut win for Adesanya in round 4. And then you have the 5th round. You have 2 minutes where it's basically 50-50, maybe slightly Pereira, and then he gets the finish. And you have the whole finishing sequence for like the last 30, 40 seconds. So you have people saying that, oh, Pereira, if you have the first round and without him rocking him in the first round, he would have took the first round, and then he would have took the second round, and he would have took the 5th round. That's essentially what people are saying. And people are also saying that Pereira's a better striker. Pereira's a better striker. I don't know what you watched in that fight. I truly don't know what you watched. Because to definitively say that Pereira is a better striker, I think is straight up insanity. I think they're very close. I personally think Adesanya is a slightly better striker, but it depends on, it's all up to interpretation, because obviously Pereira has the power advantage, but I believe Adesanya is more accurate and more technical in his striking. And if you look at, their striking matches in kickboxing, you can justify that opinion. But again, that's years ago. So I'm only really looking at this MMA fight. Look at round 4. Look at round 1 where he almost finished him. You can't just delete that out of context. And then round 2, super competitive. So I believe the 3-0 narrative is completely delusional. First off, it should be 2-1 for Pereira if you're counting all combat sports. But even that, those kickboxing matches are a totally different sport. And even if you could count them, they were 6 and 7 years ago. So I hate that argument. I don't want to hear it anymore. The other reason I believe that Adesanya is being massively overlooked in this fight is because the lack of recent finishing ability by Israel Adesanya. You go back, he has not finished a fight since Paulo Costa back at UFC 253 in September of 2020. So I think the lack of finishes, you have a decision win over Marvin Vettori, decision win over Robert Whittaker, decision win over Jared Cannonier. I think people forget that Adesanya has finished quite a few of his opponents. He has 15 wins by knockout out of 23. So I think that is just crazy to pretend like he has no finishing ability when he's finished the majority of his fights. Another reason why I believe, and maybe this isn't the majority of people, but I believe this is a factor in picking Alex Pereira to win this fight. Again, I don't think it's a bad pick, but I think this is a reason why he's being so massively overlooked. People just hate Israel Adesanya. Israel Adesanya is very cringy. Alex Pereira is this calm, quiet, savage, knockout artist. And you have Adesanya, who's kind of weird and cringy and says cringy stuff all the time. And I think a lot of people don't want to give Adesanya credit for what he's been able to do because they dislike him, because they just don't like him at all. They don't want him to be champion. And Alex Pereira is much more likable. So I think there is a group of people who, even if they don't realize it, I think they're unconsciously biased in saying, look, they're just they're grasping at straws to say, Adesanya wasn't winning that first fight. He wasn't winning. I've literally heard people basically say that. And it's just ridiculous. You go look at my prediction video comments. I've gotten paragraphs of comments saying that, no, Pereira was basically winning the fight. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous statement. And I believe some of those people are delusional based on their dislike for Israel Adesanya. Another factor that I believe is driving people to pick Alex Pereira, and this almost got me to switch sides. You had a very similar situation with Leon Edwards versus Kamar Usman 3, where Kamar Usman won the majority of the second fight, technically, and got KO'd in the 5th round and lost his belt. And then now they have the trilogy fight, and Leon Edwards wins. It was a close fight. Leon Edwards wins. And now your people are wondering, well, this is a similar situation with Pereira and Adesanya, where Adesanya was winning the majority of the first fight, but he got finished in the 5th. How will he look coming back in this rematch at UFC 287? And I think people are thinking, we've made the mistake with Usman. And me personally, that's what I was thinking. I made the mistake with Usman, and he ended up losing to Leon Edwards in the trilogy. Am I making the same mistake with Adesanya? And I think that's a legitimate reason to feel that way. But ultimately, I think that Israel Adesanya, because of his decision wins, because of the constant repeated narrative of the 3-0, which is just so ridiculous. I've already dispelled it, throughout the video, that I think people are just like, you know what? He's beat him 3 times. And I feel like this is a sentence you hear over and over and over again. Alex Pereira has his number. And he may very well win. He may very well win at UFC 287. But those 2 kickboxing matches from 7 and 6 years ago are literally irrelevant. The only thing you should really be basing your pick on is the fight at UFC 281. And for me, I saw the better fighter was Israel Adesanya, even though he got TKO'd in that 5th round, which also I thought live, when I watched the fight live, I thought it was an early stoppage. When I watched it back recently again in slow motion, and regular speed as well, but I slowed it down on YouTube and watched it a couple times that way. It was earlier than I thought. I think ultimately Pereira would have TKO'd him anyway, but there is a chance that Adesanya would have survived. And then we're talking about a whole completely different situation in the middleweight division. Now, in terms of how can the middleweight division play out after this fight, I think you have multiple different things that can happen. If Pereira wins, you can see Pereira just defend his belt against the next contender, probably Robert Whittaker, or maybe Khamzat Chimaev. I think that is a possibility. But I do believe there is a chance if Pereira wins this fight that he moves up to 205 and challenges Jamal Hill. The UFC has not announced Jamal Hill's next fight yet. Now, we don't know if Yuri's going to be injured until the end of the year. That was the original claim. Jamal Hill doesn't really have an opponent right now. So the UFC could wait and see what happens here. And if Pereira wins, he can move up and fight Jamal Hill, or he could just stay and defend his belt against Robert Whittaker or Khamzat Chimaev. Now, here's where we get into kind of a tricky situation that I think is really going to piss off a lot of fans, and especially people that hate Israel Adesanya. If Adesanya wins this fight, and he wins it convincingly, let's say he KOs Alex Pereira in the 2nd round, my official prediction, I believe there is a really good possibility that there is not a trilogy in MMA. And I think that's going to disappoint a lot of people, because people are going to say, Pereira gave you endless rematches. He beat you 3 times, and now you win 1 time. And I feel like people are going to say this, and you took your ball and went home. But I don't necessarily think that's the case. If he wins convincingly in this fight, I don't think there necessarily needs to be a trilogy. Because the reason Adesanya got this rematch is because he was winning on the scorecards in the first fight. You can look up all three of the judges' scorecards. They had it the same way. They scored every round outside of the second round for Adesanya. Obviously, the fifth round wasn't scored. So Adesanya was up on the scorecards, gets a questionable stoppage loss in the fifth round, and then on top of that, he was the long reigning champion. He deserved a rematch against Alex Pereira. That's not to say I don't want a trilogy fight if Adesanya does win. Depending on how the fight would go, I would want a trilogy match. I mean, I love this backstory. I love this rivalry they have between each other. But the reason I think it may not happen is there's not a lot of exciting contenders at middleweight, but guess who just decided they're moving up into the middleweight division? Khamzat Chimaev. And a fight that I think would be bigger than Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira 3 if Adesanya wins at UFC 287 would be Israel Adesanya versus Khamzat Chimaev. I think that is a bigger fight. And honestly, maybe this is a hot take, and you'll have to let me know down in the comments what you think. I think an Adesanya versus Chimaev title fight would do over 1 million pay-per-view buys. That's how big I think that fight would be. And I think a lot of people are going to say, Adesanya, you owe this to Pereira. And maybe he does. If Adesanya wins a close decision or it's super competitive, but Adesanya won clearly 3 rounds, I have no problem with the trilogy. I would want to see the trilogy. But I think the UFC could go to Khamzat Chimaev. There has to be a reason the UFC hasn't announced him a fight yet. I feel like they're waiting to see what happens in these divisions. And if Adesanya goes out there and beats Pereira, I think they may just book Adesanya versus Chimaev next because Pereira can always be there. He can go out, win one fight, and then fight the winner of Adesanya versus Chimaev. And ultimately, I do believe if Pereira wins, I think he's going up to 205. I don't think he's going to want to fight Khamzat Chimaev. As crazy as that sounds, Khamzat coming up from 170, I just think he is a stylistic nightmare for Pereira. And if Pereira doesn't win by KO in the first 30 seconds, I think Khamzat is going to ragdoll him and submit him in a fight. So I do believe that Pereira, if he defeats Adesanya, he's going to have better luck moving up and challenging Jamal Hill. I think that makes sense. And it has a backstory there as well. Jamal Hill just beat his coach and one of his good friends in Glover Teixeira. So I think that makes a lot of sense for him. So ultimately, that's what I think about this fight. That's why I think Israel Adesanya is being counted out. And that's what I think is going to happen in the middleweight division after UFC 287. I went over basically every possible outcome. Let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it. And thank you so much for watching.